Greetings, everyone. Welcome to Tarrant County Five Stone. I know many of you are still getting food.
Want me to whistle?
For those of you still getting food, please continue to do so. If you haven't gotten food, feel free to get in line. We've got a great meal today. I want to say thank you to Catering to Love for providing the food today. If you are new to Five Stones, please take a moment and scan this QR code. This gives us a chance to get you on our email list if you would like to do so. This would give you a chance to know about our upcoming meetings and events. This QR code is also at our registration desk. So if you need it later, you can always go by the registration desk to scan it. I want to let you guys know that we have an event coming up. The Forage Room Foundation and Tarrant County Five Stones Task Force is co-sponsoring the World Cup and Human Trafficking Community Forum. You have a handout at your table. It has a QR code where you can register for the event. It's going to be Monday, May 18th at 6 p.m. This month, we've got our spotlight agency, Cheryl's Voice. And I'm going to have Latasha come up and tell you a little bit about her mission.
Hello, everyone. Bear with my voice. I saw Bruno Mars, and so it's still gone. Still gone. Real quick, Cheryl's Voice is in honor of my mother. Cheryl was my mom. I actually witnessed the murder of my mother and the suicide of my father when I was 18 months. So what I do with Cheryl's Voice at this point in my life is I travel and I educate people on overcoming childhood trauma. I also educate the correlation between teen dating violence and domestic violence, because I also see a lot of teens that are in relationships who also are being sex trafficked, to be honest. I've seen several cases like that from when I was a probation officer. And that's really how I got connected with Five Stones early on, when it was like three of us showing up to the meetings. And now look at this room. It's amazing. So yeah, we also do community giveaways. One of my big wins is we served over 700 people at our last community giveaway. What that is Amazon donates random items to us. Usually it's mostly hygiene, household products that are very helpful for victims who are needing a fresh start. And we set it up like a store. And we advertise it on social media, and people just show up and everyone walks out with several boxes of stuff that they need. And so we are passionate about doing that. We love doing it. And lastly, we also have the Victory Over Violence 5K that the Women's Center put on. And I'm always trying to be the biggest team. We had 50 people signed up this year. Even though we got rained on and and they canceled it, but I was still very proud of the progress, the team that we had. And I'm very honored that we have that. In addition to Cheryl's Voice, I just got promoted to assistant program manager in Tarrant County over the domestic violence diversion program and the youth offender diversion. Thank you. So you might be like, what is that? That means you work with the offender? Yeah. But what that means for our community is that I'm not only working with the offender, but I'm making sure they're being held accountable. They're getting the resources that they need. So if anyone's here who has a connection with counseling, a resource for housing, a resource for any type of education as far as BIP, or any type of resources that would be helpful for mental health caseloads, because we do have a separate mental health caseload, please come and see me, because we are always looking for people that are making sure that we are giving them the right resources that are really going to be helpful to better serve our victims who are in the community, and they're depending on us to make sure that the offender is being held accountable and they're getting the right help that they need so they don't reoffend. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. All right, now we'll go ahead and do our law enforcement updates. This month it's Tarrant County Sheriff's Office, and we'll have Investigator Reyes come and share.
Hello, everybody. It's good to be here today. I'm representing the Tarrant County Sheriff's Office. Last month, our task force participated in 2 separate operations in Tarrant County. The first was a demand reduction initiative. During this 2-day operation, we made 15 felony arrests, and these were for solicitation of prostitution. The second was an outreach operation. Over the course of 2 days, we encountered 20 potential victims. 19 of them received services from Unbound Now, so that's a victory. We did also initiate 5 possible cases for human trafficking investigations. Next month, we'll be participating in another operation and preparing for multiple operations that will take place during the summer for the FIFA events. That's it. Thank you.
All right. I'm now going to ask our panelists to come to the front, please. And I'm going to go ahead and begin introductions. Their full biographies are available by following the QR codes that are on the screen. This is just a shortened biography for each of them. Detective Maria Orand is a veteran law enforcement professional with over 20 years of service with the Fort Worth Police Department. Most recently assigned to the Human Trafficking Unit before her current assignment. She has led survivor-centered investigations and partnered with the community to combat exploitation. In addition to her investigative work, she serves with the Fort Worth Police Officers Association and trains officers and new recruits on human trafficking response. Detective Orand is deeply committed to protecting vulnerable populations and ensuring every victim is treated with dignity and respect. ADA Danielle Bonanno is the human trafficking prosecutor for the Tarrant County District Attorney's Office, where she works alongside law enforcement and multidisciplinary partners to pursue justice through a trauma-informed approach. A graduate of Texas State University and Texas A&M School of Law, she has served in several key roles, including the Special Victims Unit and as Assistant Chief of the Intimate Partner Violence Unit. ADA Bonanno is actively involved in multiple anti-trafficking initiatives across Tarrant County, including the Tarrant County Human Trafficking Task Force. Beyond her professional work, she is a wife, mother, and active community member, deeply committed to advocating for survivors with compassion, integrity, and purpose. Landon Dickeson is a licensed mental health professional with over a decade of experience and serves as executive director of Ranch Hand Rescue and Bob's House of Hope. A graduate of the University of North Texas, he specializes in treating complex trauma, including sexual abuse, trafficking, and high-risk youth. Landon has worked with thousands of survivors and is the co-founder of the nation's first safe house for male victims of sex trafficking. He is also a nationally recognized speaker and advocate, leading trainings and launching initiatives like the Boys 2 campaign to raise awareness about the trafficking of boys. Please welcome our speakers. And now I'm going to have our moderator, Paola Chavez, who is one of our Five Stones Steering Committee leaders, come to the front, and she is going to lead us through this panel discussion.
Hi, everybody. So excited to be here, and thank y'all so much for being here as well. We're excited to start this conversation about a hidden population that oftentimes goes unnoticed and something that we don't really talk about. And so we're excited today to share a little bit more and hear from our experts here. So I'd like to frame the conversation first about, okay, what is one misconception about victims of, that people think about when recognizing male victims of sex trafficking?
That's a big question. I'll start and, so, oh, yeah, I don't know if y'all can hear me in the back, can you? Wait for it.
1 second. There it is.
Thank you. How about now? Better? Okay, cool. So in terms of misconceptions, I mean, the first and obvious one is that, yeah, it happens to guys too. I mean, a lot of people don't think about boys and young men when it comes to sex trafficking, but it does. Is it not even on? It says on.
That's on.
Oh, the battery's dead. I would explain it. I'll just yell. That would explain it. Hopefully y'all can hear me while I'm working on that. The first thing that I'll say and then I'll pass it along is, believe it or not, 40 to 45% of sex trafficked youth in that 24 under are male. And that is in this country, American citizens trafficking other American citizens. How about now? That did it. Okay, 40 to 45%, possibly higher.
What I have seen even before in this role, so in the Special Victims Unit, is just that they feel like they are not seen, or that they don't matter, or that they won't be seen as a victim. They are out there doing this work often to survive. It is a means of survival for them, in my experience. That's all I can speak from, is when I have come across these young men. They've come across my desk because they are victims of sexual assault, and then I learn about them and their experiences. And I hear that they have been selling sex for survival. And I'm often the first person that they've talked to about it. And they haven't talked to anybody about it because, well, they don't realize that they are victims. They don't realize that what has been happening to them is a crime. They don't realize that they are being trafficked. And that is the first problem, right? And so it is something that in every role that I've been in, whether we're talking about victims of sexual assault, victims of sex trafficking, victims of intimate partner violence, when we were talking about young men, boys, they do not see themselves as victims, whether their environment has told them that they are not victims, whether they feel like they cannot be victims. They do not feel like they are going to receive the help that they need, that they are going to be portrayed that way, or that they can get the help that they need. And so they don't talk about it. And they are not fully telling their story. And so how that impedes those of us at the table is that then we cannot help them because we don't know what's going on. And unfortunately, then they kind of get lost in plain sight. They're right there in front of us. They are at school with our kids. They could be at church with us. They could be next to us on the bus. They could be walking on the street with us. And they're suffering greatly. And it just takes one, and then they see other people getting help. And the more we talk to them and show them that they matter and that we do care at this table, then the more help they will get.
Okay, now I just got to top those, but those, the same thing, I think with males and even in our department, we have not seen male victims like we do female victims for what they've both said. They don't outcry like females do. And I think even as people think, oh, males can't be victim of trafficking or sexual assault or all the often domestic violence, and they can be victims just like a female can. But I think that's the biggest thing, is that they can't be a victim. And even when you look at our services that we have, our advocate groups, the services that we have, they really are geared more towards women. We have very few that are geared towards males. And but Ranch Hands Rescue is changing that. So, but I think that is the biggest misconception, is that males can't be victims.
Perfect. So 3 really takeaways there. One is that first, it prevents us from seeing people because we don't even believe that it happens to them. 1. 2, it may present differently, what Danielle was mentioning. And 3 is that maybe they don't even believe that they are victims of human trafficking. So obviously there's a clear gap between how males and boys are believed to be trafficked and how many are actually identified. So like, we believe there are out there, but why is there this gap between what's out there and what's actually being identified?
That's a great question. So historically, part of the problem and part of the reason that, traditionally people saw 2 to 10% when it came to males is because nobody was actively looking for males when it came to questionnaires and screeners for trafficking. So I'll give you a quick example. There's a partner out of Washington State that instituted a jail screener in their local jail. And they said, please put this, with every new inmate that comes through. And they said, okay, we'll do it with all the female inmates. And they said, no. Everybody that comes through. And they said in under a month, they had to pause the program because they got so many referrals from males, they couldn't keep up. And the point being, once you ask the question, once you're actively looking for these individuals, the numbers go up. I'll give you another example. There's a lot of programs around here, both juvenile justice and CACs, that do the See It, right? And historically, that's been a selective screening rather than a universal screening. Well, when it's selective, that means whoever's sitting there, whatever their knowledge base is, they determine, are they going to, do a screening with this individual or are they not? Well, historically, what they were seeing was about 10 to 15% were male. Well, now that the state of Texas has made it a universal requirement, those numbers have bumped up to 40, 45%, showing a clear concern with males. And the last thing I'll add, which Sonia was someone who taught me this. She does a 5-step program in the juvenile justice centers. And she said within the first or second session, females will come forward and disclose to her what had happened to them or somebody they know. Whereas the males, it's the 4th or 5th session. They just need more time. They need more education. Everything that has just already been said, those were the major barriers. But the biggest is nobody asked. And when we ask our guys, why didn't you disclose? Why didn't you tell anybody what happened? The number one answer is nobody would believe me. Like, nobody asked. No, they just thought I was a bad kid. Like, nobody explored what was going on that led to me being in front of whoever the service provider was or the law enforcement person. So again, the key here is the identification piece has been missing just historically because people weren't really asking the question. Would you add?
I just also want to add, I also think that there is a minimization piece as well on behalf of the victim themselves when they do start to feel comfortable disclosing to our Sonias that are out there and to any other trusted person that they have, there is a large minimization piece that comes. This is not necessarily different than any other survivor that we're talking about. Well, no, it is. It is different. Because in my experience, what I've seen is that not only are our young men greatly minimizing what has happened to them, whether it comes from a fear of wanting to speak it out loud, relive it, actually admit what has happened, or grappling with their sexuality. They identify as heterosexual, but the sex work that they have been forced to engage in is homosexual sex work. And let's put ourselves in a teenage boy's shoes there. Horrifying. That is horrifying. And what does that mean? The identity crisis that you go through as a teenager just on its own. And then now that is replaying in your head over and over and over again. And then if you are battling that without resources, if you're not walking your life with Christ, you are alone, right? And what are you to do? And then if you do talk to someone, are you going to face shame from them because you're already facing that inner shame? And so I have a case right now, and my investigator and I have been trying, and we've talked to just about everybody around him. And I step away. I have not been able to talk to him himself. And I step away from my desk for 5 minutes because my filing cabinet is far away from me. And he called me, and I call him back within 1 minute. And it was like he gave me that one chance. He gave me that one chance, and he didn't answer. Doesn't mean I'm not going to keep trying, but it was like he gave me that one chance. And man, did I just So it's just one of those things, and it's challenging, and so it's minimization, and it's something that it's just different. It's different with our male population.
Yeah, I think we're talking a lot about this willingness to seek help or even disclose information that has happened because of that minimization, because maybe a fear of not being believed. And I think this goes back to something Landon here mentioned about, okay, there's this societal expectation surrounding this. And so how do societal expectations around masculinity impact a male's victim's willingness to seek help or disclose exploitation? Loaded big question.
Yes, it is. It's a tough one to answer in a short period of time. But what I will say is at this point, I've had the honor and the privilege to work with several international partners, as well as many, many domestic partners here in the U.S. And what's been really fascinating to me is that issue right there has been universal, like literally across the globe. It's been the same challenge in terms of that masculine identity being something that has kept young men from coming forward. And again, it doesn't matter what culture they're in. They have a hard time coming forward and disclosing, and they have a hard time identifying themselves as a victim or as somebody who has experienced victimization, however you word it. I think a story best illustrates that specific point. We had a young man years ago who was rescued from a situation in a different state. And the guy who was actively trafficking and exploiting him, I guess that guy's friend, compatriot, I don't know what you call that fellow trafficker, had just been arrested for a massive trafficking ring across the South. And so he had that news article, right? He had video evidence, he had photo evidence, he had texts, phone calls, voicemails, like everything you can possibly think of in terms of evidence. And it still took him 6 months in our program, first in the country, blah, 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 to admit that's what happened to me. I was a victim of sex trafficking. What he was far more willing and ready to accept as a victimization is the drug trafficking. So that's the other layer that I want to kind of put in here for everybody is in many cases, there's a great deal of cross-victimization occurring. Drug trafficking, sex trafficking, labor trafficking. And one of the things I've been talking about with our undercover partners and that they're going to start looking into is when we see these cases of drug trafficking, maybe we should look and see if there's other stuff going on too with the males, right? Because that might be the avenue or the inroad in order to find these guys and to see what's going on. Because this young man in particular, he was a drug mule. That's how it started. And then they started adding the sexual abuse component. And then it became as, ADA Bonanno, did I get that right? As she said, it became a case of survival sex. And survival sex is a form of trafficking, and it's a very common one with the guys. I can't think of one guy we've had come through the program that didn't experience that at one point or another in their life. So my whole point here being that even when we're seeing labor trafficking and drug trafficking, we need to look for that third option with males, that sex trafficking component, because I can almost guarantee you it happened at one point or another just in the course of surviving in those other two. It's just that historically males are more likely to be identified as the drug or the labor trafficking, or unfortunately as a perpetrator. And this is a very difficult and nuanced conversation because as everybody in this room, I'm sure, is aware, you have your quote unquote bottom bitch. Well, they do things in the course of survival that are perpetrating. Well, same with the guys. They're having to do things that they don't want to do, but that's part of survival in that world. And as a result, they often get picked up and identified for whatever that crime was that they committed in the course of survival, rather than being identified for the ways in which they were victimized or harmed. And so it becomes a much more nuanced and difficult conversation. But I guess what I want to leave y'all with as it relates to that question is just that, one, because of that masculine identity, they are less likely to identify themselves as victims of any kind of sexual abuse. But if you're seeing the drug trafficking and or the labor trafficking, please look into the sex trafficking piece, because I can almost guarantee you that was there at one point or another.
I think you said it. I don't know.
Okay.
Like looking beyond the surface, right? We only see maybe that crime, we only see one victimization, but okay, let's lean in a little bit more to understand that nuance that you're talking about. And that really has a lot to do with also as a society, how we view males and their victimization. And so we're talking a lot about opportunities to identify, there's nuggets here about that. And so where are professionals most likely encountering male victims without realizing it? So the hospital? Is it the jails? Is it, on the labor union sides? And so where do you all see that? Let's start down.
Detective Orand first.
I would say definitely the hospitals. We've had a case fairly recently where the young man, his mom took him to the hospital, and he didn't really make an outcry. Well, I take that back. He is a minor. He's 16 years of age, but he has identified himself as being gay. And so to him, he's having sex with males because that's what he is choosing to do. But also he can't consent to having sex with anyone because of his age. And so that in itself for him is an issue, because he doesn't think that there's anything wrong with what he's doing, and it's not his fault at all. It's the males who are taking advantage of him. So definitely the hospitals, and then also we've mentioned Sonia multiple times, just what she does at with our juvenile services, and like you said, asking those questions, and then the classes that she has, and it's like it was mentioned, they didn't say anything because nobody asked them what happened. And that's the first question. If you ask, then they feel that, okay, somebody cares enough to ask me the question, I'm going to be honest and answer them, or just give them a little bit today, and then maybe tomorrow I'll give them a little bit more. But definitely the hospitals and the juvenile services, definitely.
I know that it's been in the works, and I was talking with Priscilla about this at JPS, and I'm trying to remember where it landed, but just on the paperwork you fill out at hospitals, just the questions, having the questions for every person would be a really great tool, because if you come in for an injury from work, because there are these guys and young men that are out there being labor trafficked, and we're never going to know about it. I mean, it's as simple as that. They're being, they're out there in the parking lots waiting to get picked up for a job, hopefully that day, right? And they're getting labor trafficked. We drive by them, we see it, and nothing's being done about it, right? But the question is, what can we do about it? We look at them, are they 18? Are they? And so there's a fine line there, right? And then what did they have to do to make it to that parking lot that day? How did they have to get there? How did they have to make it on that car today? How many people are they sharing a room with? So those are all the questions that can be asked by medical professionals when they make it to that hospital, to that urgent care. So I really think that that's a really good place for that. And then also the jails. I know that Landon's already talked about the study that was done. I mean, if that can be used universally, incredible, right? And then, I mean, we've got to look and see, what do we do with that data? What do we do there? Because, right, I mean, that would be creating a lot of work, but I mean, let's do something about it. Because there is the labor trafficking piece, the sex trafficking of young men and boys. It's here, it's happening. It's just, it needs to get to the police department's desk and then to my desk. Let's do something about it. We want to do something about it.
Thank you both. The only thing that I would add to that is, and this may or may not be a surprise, but college campuses, especially post-COVID. We have seen a very sharp uptick and rise. We work with a few private investigators that they have seen an incredibly sharp rise in like kind of the sugar daddy type thing and that type of victimization across college campuses. And the virtual exploitation, which, you know, in a lot of ways, it's trafficking by a third party that is therefore a website or app rather than a traditional pimp. And we have seen a massive increase in that, as I've already said, but like part of the challenge is these young individuals, whether they be male or female, they get pulled into this, and then to their way of thinking, they're in control and they're making money. And we actually had one young man that we extracted from a situation, and then he went back to it about a month and a half later. He was making 12 grand a month doing this stuff. I mean, that's a lot of money. I don't care who you are, but especially if you're a young person like that, it feels like you have the power and the control when you're getting paid like that. So a lot of that's happening across college age youth. And so it's not just our minors, right? It's that transition age, 18 to 24-year-olds, which is why we started the Safe House with that age group in mind, because one, there wasn't one, but two, that's a huge high risk population, and they're definitely not enough resources for those youth. So I would say just adding, you know, that college age, transition age youth to the narrative.
I think even going back to what you were saying about the vulnerabilities, right? If we're seeing that sex trafficking for males intersects with substance use, it intersects with physical assault, with sexual assault, intimate partner violence, those are all agencies who are in our community that can participate in this multidisciplinary type of identification and ensuring that we're not missing those people within those types of vulnerabilities, along with the universities, along with the hospitals that are in our community as well. And so I think one thing that maybe sometimes people may be hesitant, okay, we identify them, but then, okay, how do we support them in the long run? How do we support them with law enforcement, prosecution, in victim services? And so I want to frame first, how does trauma present differently in male victims, and how can that complicate identification and support?
I assume y'all want me to start that one off. Yeah, okay. I've spent a lot of time thinking about that question, especially over the last 5 years. You know, because a lot of people ask, what are the differences, right? What are the red flags? How do they look different? How do they present different? And what I always tell people is, whatever you know about females who have been trafficked, just take that knowledge and apply it, and you're 90% of the way there. Because I mean, humans, right? We're all humans, and we've all and when you experience trauma, it impacts the nervous system in roughly the same way. It might show up a little different person to person, but the nervous system is the nervous system, and so it's gonna be similar across people. However, with males, a couple of things that I've definitely noticed that are a difference in presentation is aggression and boredom. So I know that sounds kind of a funny combo, but the aggression piece, the best way I can think to describe it is if you see somebody in the corner in the fetal position crying, your kind of natural tendency, especially the kind of people that are in this room, is to go to them and check on them and see, are you okay? What's going on? But if somebody is in the corner yelling and screaming and throwing stuff at you and ready to hit you as soon as you approach them, you don't really want to go over there and say, how are you doing? But that's what's happening with males. They're talking about the culturalization of males that we were talking about earlier. Showing up with anger and aggression is more acceptable. And I want to be very clear with this. Anger is always a protecting emotion. If you think about it, it mobilizes your body for defense. It increases all the things you need in order to fight or run or whatever the case is. So when somebody's angry, you need to ask yourself, what are they protecting? It's usually some sort of fear or hurt, right? And so because males are more likely to show up that way, they don't get the same attention for fair reasons, right? I mean, I don't want to walk up to somebody who's trying to throw things at me and hurt me, but at the same time, recognizing that there is something beneath that. There is a hurt or a fear that's going on beneath that anger and that aggression. And then the second half of that is the boredom piece, or the like, I don't care, this doesn't matter, that kind of just dismissive attitude that we see a lot of times. And, you know, it's sometimes it's kind of funny, especially in a residential setting, 'cause it's like you have all this stuff for them to do and I'm bored. Like, no, you're not. Like, but that's the trauma defense. That's the, like, these things don't matter to me. They're not important to me. That's a good way to protect yourself from investing in something that you might actually enjoy. To risk enjoyment is scary when you've been through that kind of trauma. And so recognizing that when these guys present with either aggression or boredom or things that look a little different, just recognizing that there is a hurt and a pain and a fear that's beneath that. And that's what actually needs to be addressed via the trauma work. And it's obviously that's easier said than done. And so the lack of resources specific to them is part of the challenge, because if you look at it and think about it, how often are we using the tree or the butterfly or the dove or a heart or a flower, you know, as part of our symbology or our symbolism? Nothing wrong with that. I love those symbols. It's just that a lot of guys don't, and they think that means it's only for girls. And it's like, well, no, or women. And it's like, no, it's not. And I also just, one moment of soapbox. The notices of funding that are available, the grants that are available, they say that everybody can apply to them, but the ones that are get rewarded or awarded rather are those for females, almost exclusively. And in fact, I got denied on a grant, I won't say what organization, years ago, or agency, and they said I used outdated language. I used the word male. And then the next year, they released a notice of funding that in the title said, for the prevention of trafficking of girls. And it's for those up to 24. Well, I don't know about y'all, but I think most females 18 to 24 would be a little bit offended if you called them a girl as opposed to a woman, or female identifying, right? Like, so it's like, come on, y'all. It's got this double standard here. We got to open this up and make it available and let them know. And the last thing I'll say, and I'll pass it on, is when we did our billboard campaign that just explicitly stated males are trafficked too, and it had visual representations of males, we had several, and I mean several, calls straight from survivors. Not just NGOs, not just law enforcement, we had tons of those, but we had individuals who themselves were victims, saw the billboard and called us because they're like, oh, that's what happened? That can happen, oh. And then we got them into services. So seeing that visual representation does make a big difference in whether or not they're going to come forward and recognize that they can be supported in those ways.
I think that Landon touched on most of it, but I just want to emphasize that truly, if you have a knowledge base that is primarily working with girls or young women or adult women dealing with sex trafficking and looking at the trauma and how it presents with them, you are going to see parallels there. Being withdrawn, perfectionism, but because I mean, I have juvenile victims right now who are very angry, yeah. And that is how they present, that are female, and they present angry, and they fight, and they get in trouble for fighting, right? You know, so it is a trauma response. Our brains are finicky things, and when bad things happen to us, our brain responds. And you know, when I've worked with young, like really young boys that have been sexually abused, the biggest thing that I had to fight against was not only, you know, defense attorneys and their, you know, ways of fighting cases, but those children's moms. You know, they're not responding the way I feel like, are you sure that they were sexually abused? Because they're not really acting like how I would think a sexually abused child would act. Or I was sexually abused and he's not acting the way that I did. And so I think the biggest thing is that everybody responds to trauma differently. And when we're talking about the anger, I think anger is an easy emotion, like Landon was talking about. And quite often there is something underneath, and we have to ask ourselves, what is the underlying emotion? What is going on underneath? And so our teachers, our school counselors, you know, our NGOs that, you know, if you're in a treatment facility, if you have a child that is often acting out, or the class clown that's a little bit extra, you know, maybe there's something more there. Because that's where I have seen when I've worked with the you know, when we're talking adolescent, like middle school or 8 to middle school, that's where I'm seeing the anger really kick in, because we're dealing with testosterone and trauma, and they don't know what to do with it. And then they're like, wait, I'm supposed to be a man. I'm supposed to be tough, and I'm not supposed to show my emotions. And so it's a lot that, you know, that they're battling with that. And so they don't want to ask for help. And so they're trying to figure it out on their own.
Landon mentioned boredom, and that was one of the cases that we had. I didn't really think about that until you mentioned it, but this young man's from a different country. So he's over here, doesn't know the language. He's in a school where he doesn't comprehend, he can't understand what's going on. He was very involved in a lot of activities where he came from. When they got here, the mom just didn't know where to go to get him back involved in different things. So he was bored, kind of went online, started chatting with people, I'm assuming at first he thought were his own age, to try to make friends. Come to find out they weren't. You know, they were males who took advantage of him. And the mom, when we met with her, she did a lot of legwork. She was like, she was speaking in Spanish, so I had Eleni with me, but she had gone and just like, you know, chatted, was asking all these questions, and it was coming up. It was telling her like where to go, who to contact. And so that's how we came in contact with her. But just that boredom, she said, you know, she's a single mom. She has a younger child. So she was very busy with the younger one because he was older and he was, you know, able to take care of himself. And she didn't realize that him not being involved in things was going to lead down this path. But of course, who would, as a parent, you wouldn't think that of, but you know, but she has been able to find resources and get him involved, and he was in a program, and so he's doing better. But just, I didn't even think of boredom. You always think of the anger component of it, but the boredom, I didn't tie that together until Landon just said that. So.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it goes back to our idea of the ideal victim, right? How are they supposed to present before victimization, during victimization, and then afterwards as well? And like, we have that. And so it gets intimidating when we see aggression in a different way. We see boredom and it's like, well, I just planned this entire programming and it's not working, right? And so there's frustration there as well. And so I think it identifies some training gaps. And so I'd love Detective Orand to talk first about law enforcement, prosecution, then we'll go victim services. What training gaps exist when it comes to identifying male trafficking victims?
For training, I would say the majority of, well, probably all of our training is geared more towards those female victims. Even when we do our outreach operations, we focus on the females that are on the sex ad pages. That's where we, that's where our focus is. So even with us, it's we even focus more on the female victims. But there's also, I think it does just because, and just, I can only speak for me since I was in the unit for 4.5 years. Other than this one young man that I have right now, I didn't have another victim, male victim. I've had one for labor trafficking, but as far as sex trafficking, I've only had one only one person come forward so far, or that I've had. So even in our numbers, we haven't seen it here, or I should say, I haven't seen it here in the department for me, but it's also kind of, Landon mentioned, 90% of the red flags are going to be the same. So what is that 10% that we're missing? What are we missing in our training that we're not getting to find that 10% so we can find those male victims? So I would say the training for us, just finding other training outside of what we already have.
So as Maria said, I mean, our trainings and our conferences they overlap a lot. So, excuse me, the difference will be our breakout sessions are going to be different, right? So it'll be law enforcement go this way, prosecutors go this way. And there are not going to be a lot of, specifics as they relate to boys or young men or men. And that is the same for any kind of trainings that I've gone to for human trafficking and in the child sexual assault space. I'm trying to think of a time when I went to anything that specifically mentioned boys, and it just doesn't come to mind. I have gotten my experience from prosecutors that have come before me in the unit, and they had a case, right, that they went to trial on, and I can think of one or two, and they helped prepare me for that. And then I'm a bonus mom, and so my older son, who's 11 now, was 3 when I had the privilege of coming into his life. And then so I got a lot of experience from being with him. He was 4 when I entered into the special victims unit, so he was 4 to 6. And then I have a nephew that I helped raise, and so I have a lot of experience with boys in that part. And now I have a younger son as well. So I have a lot of experience with boys, so I'm lucky in that sense. So I've gathered that. So when I'm sitting down, because I've worked, I think compared to a lot of my coworkers, I've had a lot of cases that have boy victims. And so when the mom says, I think we need to drop charges, they're saying that maybe this didn't happen, or they don't want to. I said, okay, well, it's policy that we need to have a meeting. Yeah. So I have them come up, and because I want to talk to them, right? I want to talk to them. And they're like, well, so he got me a weight set. And it's a really great weight set, and it's going to help me with football next year, and it's going to get me really strong, and he's going to help me work on it. And so, right? I mean, it is just different. It's the same, but different in the sense of their perpetrators have found a way to groom everybody around them and have worked their way into their lives and figured out a way to silence them. And it'll be the same when they're in middle school and their traffickers figure out a way to pull them back. And so when we're talking about, as the prosecutor's standpoint, prosecutors need more training on when we're across the table, and it's a table just like this, across the table from a young boy, what questions to ask. Why are you saying that you didn't quite tell the truth before? Is it really that you didn't quite tell the truth, or who did you talk to before coming today? So, I mean, those are the same questions that you would with any child, but with the boy, there are some different things that we need to ask and some different things that we need to look into to see what's going on, because boys are just different. I mean, they just are. And if you don't have the experience of having boys in your home, you know, you need that training. You need that training of how to talk to them and how to get them to open up. Because it takes time. It takes time. It takes more than one meeting. It takes more than 30 minutes. And it takes building a relationship with them. And it takes a lot of trust. And that is something that prosecutors need training on, specific to boys.
Very well said. So just kind of laying it out, developmentally appropriate training for law enforcement, first responders, DAs, prosecutors, you know, the whole spectrum of providers, developmentally appropriate and gender appropriate training and understanding. You know, there was a movement a little while back, I believe Byron Facet's the one who pushed it, but that added males as a quote unquote special population. And that was great because now they finally entered the narrative. But if it's, you know, if it's 40, 45, 50%, then that's not a special population, that's half. So like we really got to upgrade that and introduce those concepts along with the other populations that are vastly overlooked, like our neurodivergent youth, our indigenous youth. They're trafficked at a rate 2 or 3 times higher than their peers. And for those who have a severe physical or mental disability, it's 6 times higher. So, I mean, it's horrific, and we don't talk about those things enough. So training specific to those populations, definitely. When it comes to the trauma-informed care side of things, which, you know, obviously is where I'm focused, it's about what are the best practices in the field already. So, you know, you're talking TBRI, DBT, EMDR, all the acronyms, because my field loves acronyms. And then from there, how do you tailor it to the individual that you're sitting across from, the person and their background and what's going on for them and where they've come from and what are those norms? I know that adds a layer of challenge because it's not quite as cookie cutter or form, and therefore that adds time, that therefore adds money. I recognize the uphill battle that's faced. However, if it's folded into existing trainings, it's not that much of a lift to add in and to do a little extra tailoring, because again, I don't want people to walk away from this going, well, that's a big uphill fight. Like, it's really not. There's a lot of really great things we can do to really tailor it and zero in, but let's just start by adding them in the first place and just having the general discussions enough that people are starting to ask the questions, do the looking, and starting to dig into male victimization, especially as it relates to sexual abuse. So I know we're about out of time. So I just want to say, like, if we just start adding that in, there's a lot of specificity that we can add later on. But let's just start by putting them in the first place.
We got to start by recognizing it first and adding it to what we already do every single day and not forgetting them even when we're talking about it in training. And I even think what Danielle was mentioning there too, just for the community, maybe you're not part of an organization, maybe you're just here to learn a little bit more. I think there's even opportunities for the prevention side, but also like, let's start with believing males. Like, that's the baseline. Let's believe males that things have happened to them or there has been circumstances that have been hard and it presents differently. And let's start there and let's have those conversations with other people around us. So before we open it up to a Q&A for your questions, so start thinking about it. I just want to ask the final question. One thing, what next steps would you suggest for the audience here? Short and quick before we go into Q&A.
Just get involved in your community, and especially like the cards that are on the table, those community forums that happen. Just go and listen and learn, and because that's the only way that we are going to combat this problem is by all of us being aware. You know, when I worked in the unit and people would ask me, what do you do in the department? And I would tell them, and they're like, oh, well, that doesn't happen in Fort Worth. That happens across, that happens, in China or it doesn't happen here. And, then I would have to tell them, no, then we do. But just so really just being involved in your community, going to forums and asking questions and then just listening and then just passing it on. Always, like Felicia says, next month when you come here, invite somebody else to come with you. And because that's how we are going to, like I said, that's how it's going to take all of us to combat human trafficking.
I think Paula kind of took it. Check your bias at the door. Realize what, I mean, just think about it. The next time you hear that a male talking about being a victim or someone talking about a male being a victim or anybody being a victim, are you second guessing that person? Because I think you might find yourself doing that. Even if you're in this room, even if you are in this population that is here to help, I think you might find yourself doing that. And we're human. It happens. And so the more we can work on that and the more we can start with believing and trusting, then we can be a part of the change. And then just what Maria said, learning, educating. If you're a man in the room, go to the MACE breakfasts, go to the different programs that are out there, and truly start learning about what human trafficking looks like in your community. And then you can be a part of the change right here, because there is just so much of it in our backyard that we just don't even know about. And I will, take a little nugget from what Tim Tebow said at the luncheon, that you cannot be closing your ears to what's happening. We have to be here to listen and then ready to take steps to help.
Thank you both. Y'all are amazing. And I really appreciate y'all taking the time to do this. So I want to leave you with one thing, which is trust and verify. Don't just take my word for the stuff I'm saying up here. The things that I'm saying are not just coming from me, Landon, because of the work that I do. I've done the research. I've talked to the people that have been in this industry and that have been doing the work for 30, 40, 50 years. Go read the Boys 2 studies that are out there. That was done by ECPAT and UNICEF and Amnesty International, like big recognized names, the U.S. Department of Justice. Like, go read those studies. Read the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. They released mid-year statistics last year for the first time in 41 years because of how bad the increase was. And the two biggest categories of increase were AI-generated child sexual abuse material and sexploitation, 70% of which is targeting males. That's not me, right? That's not Landon telling you that. That's from these large organizations that all of us know the name and recognize. Go read the research. Go read what they're saying, the articles that they're putting out. They're doing the data. I mean, they're doing the research. They're putting the data together. The Human Trafficking Data Project at SMU. I mean, there are some really incredible groups out there starting to dig into these things. And over the last 10 years, because they've been looking, they're all saying the same thing. They're all saying 40-ish%, probably more, because it's so vastly underreported. So again, the only thing I want to add based on that question is trust what I'm saying, but also verify what I'm saying, because it ain't just coming from me.
Great. Thank you all so much for your expertise. We're going to open it up to any questions from the audience. Not everybody at once.
Very enlightening about how things can be different in Europe. More for you, thank you. You mentioned the violence. I think we can all see that. What does the boredom thing look like? Sitting around playing video games, what does that look like?
So just for our people virtual, so we know that aggression shows up, but what does actual boredom look like in real time?
So that's a great question. In our program, what that looks like is saying I'm bored, like just straight up saying I'm bored. And it's like, no, you have all these things to do. Or probably in more detail, what you're looking for is when they say something like that, or they are just sitting playing on a video game or something like that, and you go ask them and they say they're bored, and then you present them with options and the response is on board. That is a trauma response. That is a shutting down because they are not used to having options and choice. They're used to somebody controlling them, right? And males in particular, as the research shows, they are more likely to be criminalized than they are to be perceived as a victim and receive victim services. So not because it's any fault of law enforcement or judicial system at all, but that's a very controlled environment, right? Going into jail, prison, et cetera, it's a very controlled environment. So you go from controlling abusive childhood, controlling abusive trafficker, controlling system that you're in, even though you're now out of the abuse. They're used to being controlled. And there is a term, institutionalization. That is a process that can occur to people. And then the streets, that's the complete opposite. No control, all chaos, constant chaos. And so if you grow up in constant chaos, peace feels scary. Peace and calm feels unsafe because you're expecting a bad thing to happen, but it never comes. And so you just got this tension building up inside you, which either explodes as aggression or fizzles out into depression because you just don't know what to do with that fear. And so that's a big part also of why you see so much self-sabotage with these populations, because self-sabotage in essence is just a shield. It's a protecting mechanism that you're also hurting yourself with. So the thing that's protecting you is also the thing that's bashing you in the face. So that's kind of what you end up seeing, is that they kind of create the chaos because they're waiting and expecting a bad thing to come and happen. So when you see that boredom, like I said, it's usually it's a trauma reaction, but it's usually a product of not previously having choice, or not wanting to engage in an interest, because what if I do enjoy that and then that gets taken away again?
And I just have seen it, or for me, it's not, I'm not seeing it myself. It's, caregivers are describing it. It's that just withdrawal, just being withdrawn, inability to choose what they want to do. And then they'd rather just go sit over here and continue to say that they want to do something, but then they're not going to choose what they want to do. And then they're just going to withdraw. And it's not quite a depression. It's this kind of like in between state. Withdrawal is the best word that I can give to you. And I know it's kind of weird because if you're a parent, kids will go through that phase. I'm bored. And you say, well, you've got all of these things around you. Just choose, right? So how is it different? It's different because, we're looking at kids where they are either have been previously able to choose, or have been previously interested in doing these things, or it's just this like hesitancy, this like, no, I would rather just not do that. I'm just going to come over here. I'm just going to stay here and stay in this space of I'm just bored. Because if I engage and if I get happy, it might just be yanked away. Anything else?
No. And then when I had mentioned boredom, his was more out of, he wasn't involved in anything like he used to be because they were here in a new country, and she just didn't know where to go and find activities for him to be involved in. And so with being a single mom, working multiple jobs, his boredom in not having activities led him to looking on the internet and unfortunately, being taken advantage of, even though to him, he was choosing to do that. And he was like, well, this was my choice. This is what I wanted to do. Nobody forced me to do anything. So out of his boredom from not being involved is what led him to being sexually assaulted and trafficked.
Yes.
I know maybe a year ago, having the experience office here, and talked about how boys being tricked through, somebody popping it online, pretending to be a young girl, and then they get pictures exchanged. Is You talk about grooming. How are boys groomed? For being groomed.
So the question is, how have boys been groomed? And we've heard, about tech facilitated type of trafficking or other types of grooming or sextortion. So how are boys being groomed for our online people?
Starting point for that would be gaming platforms. That is the most common these days, is chats via gaming platforms. And so you don't necessarily even expect it because they're just playing a video game, but the chatting starts there. Grooming, this is a really hard pill to swallow, but traffickers, groomers, abusers, they're smart, they're clever, they look like us. Like, they're not monster in the closet or an idiot. Like, they know what they're doing, and they're very patient. I mean, I'm talking like 5 years of work put in for one kid, easily. Like that, at 2 to 5 years is pretty normal. And so what that looks like is, and again, another bitter pill to swallow, is they use a lot of the same skills that we as service providers use to help somebody recover. So a very common one would be normalizing. So when somebody's been through really awful things and they feel a lot of shame and guilt around it, we will normalize, like, it's okay to feel shame. It's okay to feel, guilt or fear or anger. Like, that's normal to fear that after having been through those things. Well, people who are grooming kids do the same thing. They just do it with their own agenda. So instead of trying to relieve the shame, their agenda is getting them to the point where they're comfortable doing something that they wouldn't have been comfortable with if asked right out of the gate. And so it's introducing these conversations a little bit at a time, little bit at a time. And because, another way to look at it is, if abusers started with the physical or emotional or sexual abuse right out of the gate, well, then it'd be far less people that would get lost in it and get hooked into it and then have the trauma bonding and everything else that comes with it. Yeah, that would still happen and does. But by and large, the whole reason that somebody gets lured and groomed in that way is because they start with these nice things. They start with promises, or they, as was mentioned earlier, they give gifts. Gift giving is a big one. And then over time, just a little bit, little bit, little bit. And like I said, 2 to 5 years, these kids, they're playing those games every day for hours at a time. So, I mean, like, just think about it in terms of therapy, right? As a therapist, I see somebody for 1 hour once a week. These people are talking to these kids for several hours a day, every day, for years. Well, that gives a lot of opportunity to test boundaries and to figure out where the gaps are, or where are they not getting what they need from their parents or from their friends or their school or whatever. And like, oh, I can fill that gap, or, oh, I can, give that there. It's figuring out that person. It's very individualized in that way. And so it's, by and large, it's that kind of long-term process, but also, as was mentioned earlier, they groom the system. So they don't just groom the kid, they groom the system around them. And so that's why a lot of times, and I'm sorry, but just go look it up, the number of teachers that are sleeping with students, it's astronomical and horrific. But like, the point is, they're part of the systems that we are all in. Like, they don't look like they don't belong, because they do. They're part of it. There was a big sting not too long ago. Highland, I think it was the Highland Village police chief a year or two ago. I mean, it's teachers, it's lawyers, doctors, it's all kinds of people, right? And so it's just important to recognize. If we have time, I do want to talk, if we can, about the torture issue. But just real briefly, there was a doctor out of Florida that was talking kids into, like, cutting themselves, hanging themselves, and doing sex acts online. And the only reason he got caught is because one 13-year-old girl hung herself and died in the course of that virtual call. And there's been a sharp rise in that. I've talked to our friends at DPS and FBI, Homeland Security. They have seen a sharp rise in this with this online exploitation. Well, they don't start by asking for that, right? They build the kid towards those kinds of things until the kid has the buy-in to then go through with whatever the thing is that they would not otherwise normally do. It's a very difficult conversation, and I'm more than happy to send resources on it if you want to learn more, because it's a tough one, and it's an especially tough one to have in a public setting.
I would just say that when I'm going to speak to, like, high school level, providing a space for the young men and their friends to drink, to hang out, providing alcohol, talk to them about, do you have a girlfriend? Do you, are you all sexually active? Oh, I'll get you condoms. Your mom doesn't need to know about it. Then let's talk in the church space. Someone that's active in the church, finding couples that haven't been on dates in a really long time, offering, getting really close with them, and then offering to, we'll watch your kids so that you can go on a date. We will, do you guys, I see that your house needs some house repairs. We'll help you with those house repairs. And then after that, why don't me and my wife keep your kids? And, just so happens that the wife takes Ambien at night, or, whatever it may be, or she's a hard sleeper. And just whatever they can do to get access to that child. But then when we're talking about the teenage boys, we see it over and over and over again, providing a space for parties. And then when they get their friends there, then they've got the gambit. Okay. And then we enter alcohol, we enter drugs. And then not only are we talking about lack of consent due to age, now they're inebriated. And so it creates a whole host of issues. And so I've had that case 3 times, right? And then comes the sugar baby type situation, and also the exchange of funds, right? And so it enters into a long-lasting relationship that started when these were 16-year-old boys all the way into their early 20s. And then when they get to college and they have an RA or a college counselor that they feel comfortable with, or they are in a class, or they see a billboard and they realize what happened to them, then they outcry. And then we get the case.
Yeah.
No.
Alrighty. Well, I think we are out of time. Can we please give them a round of applause? Okay, Brian.
Thank you all so much.
You.
All right, and I'm sure there were questions that we did not get to. So if you have other questions that you'd like to ask, feel free to email me and I can get you in contact with our panelists. I do want to leave you with some action steps. First, challenge the narrative. Speak up when trafficking is discussed, when it's only affecting women, when people say it's only affecting women and girls, and use inclusive language. When you're attending trainings, ask if their statistics include male victims, and how are the male victims being identified and served. I will quiz you next month to see if you are doing this. Thank you all for coming out. We'll see you all next month.